Good evening and welcome to the Museum at FIT's Fashion Culture Series. It is my great honor to welcome Sass Brown, who will present her book, Refashioned, Cutting-Edge Clothing from Upcycled Materials. The Acting Assistant Dean for the School of Art and Design at the Fashion Institute of Technology, Sass Brown is a researcher, writer, blogger, and educator in eco-fashion in all of its various expressions, from slow design and heritage craft skills to recycle, reuse, and new business models. She has published papers, spoken, taught, and advised women's cooperatives, educational institutions, governmental agencies, NGOs, SMEs, and the creative industries in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, Chile, Sri Lanka, Korea, China, Italy, France, the US, Canada, and the UK on the topic of sustainable design. Brown communicates and promotes the best in eco-fashion design through a multitude of media, most notably her books, Eco-Fashion and Refashioned, her website, www.ecofashiontalk.com, and her journalism. Please note that after her presentation, we will have a question and answer session, followed by a book signing upstairs of her book. Sass, thank you very much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. I want to thank the museum for inviting me. I realized when we were doing this that it's been 3 years exactly, almost to the date, that I stood on this stage to launch my last book, Eco-Fashion. So thank you for the museum for inviting me twice to do this. With the launch list now of my second book, Refashioned, I found myself reviewing a lot of the material and content of that first talk as we were moving everything across from the old website to the new website. And I realized how much has changed in those 3 years since I first published this book. I knew when I published it that it was the first book to talk about eco-fashion as separate from eco-design, and it was the first one to really raise the level of conversation to high design. Although I knew that, what I didn't realize was how much the book would change my life. And there have been significant changes in that time. When I did this speech for the launch of the last book, I was resident director of FIT's program in Florence in Italy. So I was working in relative quiet and seclusion in my little bit of a palazzo in Florence in Italy. To now, where I am back in New York, I'm working, as the museum said, as the acting assistant dean for FIT's School of Art and Design, so quite a change. I'm also one of a community, and a community of eco-fashion activists, some of whom I know are in the audience right now, of bloggers, writers, activists, fashion activists, and educators. My website and their websites and a host of other social media is the main means that we communicate with, whether it's through Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, any number of different social and professional mediums. I'm also the New York editor for Coco Eco magazine, which is a glossy e-zine on eco-fashion, celebrity and lifestyle. And I freelance for various other different magazines and websites, and write and advise for 2 country-wide agencies helping to sustain the fashion industries in Sweden and in Denmark. And as they said, I speak in a lot of countries around the world. I love to travel. It's where I get the research and the resources to write about. So I'm part of a movement of eco-fashion activism that celebrates and it honors the work of designers and brands who are acting as change agents in an industry that is experiencing revolution at the moment. I'm one of many who help to communicate the inequities and the problems in the mainstream fashion system, as well as part of a global community that uses the internet to promote the work of worthwhile designers. What I do is tell the stories about eco-fashion designers around the world who are challenging the system of fashion, working with new materials, recontextualizing ancient techniques, and making conscious choices through their work. I write about design as important as ecology, because I don't believe producing more boring, ugly clothing should be a sustainable goal. I write... Thank you. I write about high-end, cutting-edge, conscious design because I think that's what I have to add to this conversation. There are many voices in this conversation, all as valid as each other, but that's what I have to add to it. And that's because I come my background is as a designer, that's my trade. And I believe in fashion as being aspirational and inspirational, and it's the momentum that spurs the industry. So this is the cover of my book. Some of you saw it on your way by, on the way in. It's called, that I'm launching tonight. This is actually 2 weeks prior to the official launch in the US. It's not scheduled to come out till the 29th. The publish date was pushed back, so it was out yesterday in the UK. It's already out in Spain and the Far East. So these are advanced copies, so otherwise we won't be able to get another copy till the 29th. It's an outgrowth of my first book, and simply because I wanted to write about so many more designers that were working with upcycled materials, really great designers, that I just couldn't fit in a single chapter of my other book, Eco-Fashion. The first book discussed eco-fashion really in big picture, as opposed to this one, which focuses solely on designers that are working with upcycled and reclaimed materials. So designers who are recontextualizing waste as resource and challenging the mainstream system through good design and conceptual thinking. Why is it important? Well, it is because the average lifespan of a piece of clothing in the Western world is 3 years. And that's the average lifespan, meaning much of it is far shorter than that, especially fast fashion. The fast fashion cycle promotes new styles every week, sometimes every few days, while lowering prices. We've moved from an investment in clothing, which may have been comparable perhaps to the purchase and the consideration given for a major kitchen appliance, to what now is much more in common with a movie download or a takeout meal, a purchase that is as thoughtlessly discarded as last night's leftovers. It's important because the average American buys around 68 garments a year, of which 85% ends up in landfill. Because 15% of material waste is built into the mainstream fashion system. That's 15% of material waste at every stage, from extraction with the growing fiber or chemical extraction, all the way through to the finished garment. And because 95% of all textiles are actually recyclable in some way, shape or form, and textiles do present a particular problem in landfill. Synthetic fibers don't decompose. Polyester is very similar to plastic bags. All of the issues that are going on with plastic bags, they don't decompose in a scalable timeline, which basically means they don't know how long it's going to take for them to decompose. The expectation is it's somewhere between 200 and 500 years, but as it hasn't been around that long, nobody actually knows yet. Woolen garments, although natural fibers, do decompose, but they actually produce methane through that decomposition process, and that's a major contributor to global warming. And then the exportation of used clothing to the African continent has, of course, devastated their fledgling textile and apparel industries. Good quality of garments can, of course, be resold. Damaged quality garments can be redesigned and recut. Pure cotton and wool can be shredded, as can polyester be melted down, and they can all be respun into new fibers. While poor quality textiles can be used for insulation, whether it's building insulation, car seat, padding, any number of different uses. The image on the left here is actually cardato, which is a recycled wool fiber from Prato. It's actually one of the dirty secrets of Italy. They've been recycling wool for hundreds of years. They just neglected to tell anyone that many of those quality luxury Italian textiles were actually made out of recycled wool fibers. So they are still quality, beautiful Italian fabrics. But now, because of the focus on recycling and minimizing waste, it's been branded and promoted as cardato, and it's actually the first fiber in the world to be granted and certified as carbon neutral. And the one on the right is by a Danish denim manufacturer called Nudie Jeans, who recycle their used denim jeans to spin new fibre with and then to make new jeans from it. The race to the bottom for manufacturers to produce faster, cheaper, is getting close to the end. There are fewer and fewer countries for manufacturers to outsource their products to get it cheaper, quicker. And that's becoming apparent. While the real cost of cheap fashion is becoming apparent even to the most voracious fast fashion consumer. Labour Behind the Label, the Clean Clothes campaign, their anti-denim sandblasting campaign, which was this last year, exposed the human cost of using sandblasting to fade denim jeans. Greenpeace's more recent detox campaign that exposed the dangerous chemicals used in the dyeing and finishing of our garments that are released into the water system when consumers wash their clothes. The now 3 consecutive Bangladesh garment factory disasters, the Tarzeen fire that killed 117 people, the Rana Plaza building collapse that killed 1,129 people and injured and maimed over 2,500 people. And now the Gazipur factory just a couple of weeks ago that killed another 9 and injured 50. This is just a price that is far too high a cost to pay for fast fashion. Activism has played a major role in communicating the cost of this race to the bottom, making journalists, writers, and bloggers one of the most important means of communicating this information. Campaigns, excuse me, like Greenpeace's Detox have been fought on the internet and social networks. The campaign to end sandblasting is actually a perfect example. This was a war fought on Facebook and Twitter, using the brand's own blogs and other social media against them as a means of communicating their failings to their followers. These tactics managed to get commitments from over 40 major luxury denim manufacturers to cease using sandblasting as a means of deconstructing their denim jeans within 10 months of the start of the campaign. That's how effective it is. An incredible range of inspirational fashion designers have managed to challenge the definition of luxury by working mostly with wasted materials and recontextualizing waste instead of as trash, as resource. By producing sophisticated designs with labor-intensive workmanship, they've rebalanced the elements to allow for the recontextualization of material use and overcome previously held ideas about materials as well as processes. This Armani dress that's on the slideshow right now is made from recycled PET fibre for Livia Firth, that's the wife of Colin Firth. It's a prime example. Polyester is not usually considered a fabric choice for red carpet Armani gowns. But by recontextualizing the material choice through a balance of sophisticated design and labor-intensive styling, the material choice actually adds value to the finished design by doing good as well as looking good. What I want to do tonight is actually to share some of the stories of the designers around the world who have managed to turn the model of luxury on its head by reversing what we understand as waste. Designers who choose to work with discarded materials, who through their labor, their love, and their talent manage to make them more desirable than new, because this is what the book is about. The recontextualization of waste as resource is something that I think Austrian brand Steinweider have done probably more eloquently and poetically than most, choosing a particularly challenging material to revalue, while making what is obviously quite an edgy, rebellious-looking collection with uncompromising style out of used and damaged socks. Not exactly what most people would think of as a luxury material. This really is one of the best examples I know about taking a material not only considered worthless, that of single, wholly worn socks, but actually considered distasteful, and completely revaluing it through creativity and through skill. I've tried to keep single images on the show so that you can see really clearly these garments, because they really need to be seen to be truly appreciated. These are great pieces with a texture and a depth you really have to see to fully appreciate. Each piece is unique, as much recycled design is, so no two pieces are the same. You can see actually the dimensions of the socks a lot clearer on the lighter ones. Each of the socks vary in texture, weight and tonality, and the heels of the socks actually create this fabulous dimension and depth to her work. So it's got a sculptural quality to it. This really is designing with recycled materials at its best. Not making do with second-rate sourcing, but actively choosing to highlight the value and uniqueness of the materials, turning them into something of beauty that can't be duplicated with new materials, that have their own new unique value due to the wear and not despite it. Steinweider's process is to piece all of the socks together much like a giant jigsaw puzzle. They don't go onto a textile base, they are actually just socks, they're not applied onto anything. They're sorted into various colour groupings, their designs tend to be relatively monochromatic, so that the texture and the tonality and the depth of the texture are actually what showcases. And each one of these pieces are draped directly on a mannequin, so each one, there are no paper patterns that exist, no drapes, each one is completely uniquely produced. This is a Paris-based designer called Paulina Pliska. She's actually a great example of a designer featuring what would be normally considered the flaws and the damages of her material sources. So the hauls, the runs, the pulls, that's what she features through her designs. Pliska creates artistic and wearable textile compositions using textiles much like a fine artist does. She really paints with these textile compositions. New textiles. She creates delicate textural tone-on-tone tonality combinations featuring the deconstruction and the finishing, which really belay the delicacy of her work, but completely rejoice in the imperfections of the details. So you can see quite clearly on the leggings all of the runs and so on, and that's really a feature of her work. She works predominantly with knits and sheer fabrics. And her designs have a sort of rebellious romanticism about them. She uses, again, predominantly monochromatic colour compositions, choosing to focus on the deconstruction of the materials rather than the colour composition. And her designs are highly constructed, using often very tiny, tiny scraps of textiles. Her process is not dissimilar from Steinweider's. After sourcing the materials, they're actually sorted by colour and so on, washed and cleaned, obviously. And the textiles in this case are actually shredded into small strips, so to keep them in relative similar size scales. And in this case, she does pin them onto a base fabric. So she makes an overstitch that keeps them all together to produce a new textile. She creates these almost sort of crazy patchworks with her overstitching of all of these tiny pieces. Nature is one of her inspirations, and it's completely leftover fabric scraps. And I mean tiny little wasted pieces of selvage, of threads, of any number of tiny scraps. She constructs them almost a bit like a bird's nest, just collecting all of these materials together. And she's another designer. Many designers in recycled materials work directly on the mannequin. So she works again directly on the mannequin, does not have any patterns of any of her work. And she interweaves and shreds all of her fabrications together, because much of them are knits, they naturally conform to the body contours. It's actually one of my favourite pieces of hers. You can see how narrow and tiny some of the shreds are on the top and on the leggings. She's also known, as many of these designers are, really as artists. She works very much like an installation artist. Many times she works in open studio environments, in public settings. So, for example, she worked two weeks in La Forêt, which is a Tokyo mall, where they constructed a studio for her, and she worked totally exposed with her clients on her collection. She's done that in many locations, from Dublin to Vienna to Edinburgh and so on, where she works in these very public installation type settings, but on her collection or directly with her clients. It's also allowed her, which many designers are also doing, it's completely released her from the standardized traditional fashion show format. Many of these designers don't show collections per se. They don't do 2 seasons or 4 seasons a year. They don't do a sample set. They don't have salesmen. They may not show in a fashion show setting. So they're all finding their own means of expressing their artistic creations, and it's mostly not through the mainstream system. She, in fact, likes to incorporate fashion video projections and live painting when she's doing her work. Alabama Channing's probably one of the better-known designers who manages to completely recontextualize her materials through extreme use of labor and technique. Her material choice is simple, humble cotton jersey, one of the most common everyday fibers that is used to make everything from underwear to t-shirts. So it's not glamorous or special in any way. The value of Channing's work is her beautiful, labor-intensive design, which far outweighs the simple choice of materials. She works with organic and recycled cotton jersey, hence her inclusion. And every stitch on an Alabama Channing design is sewn by hand. That is, every stitch, the seams, everything, not just the handwork that's visible. Channing's work far outreaches beyond simple recontextualization of material choice. She pulls on history, tradition, geographic location, culture, and her work revalues craft itself. She honors the tradition of domestic creativity, quilting circles, and the South's tradition of growing cotton. She recontextualizes materials, process, craft, and what we consider luxury. Her work is characterized by a technique that she does called reverse applique, which is utilizing usually 2 varying colors of cotton jersey, one layered on top of the other. The top layer is screen printed with the design, which is then hand stitched around, often in a very simple running stitch, in a thick buttonhole type cotton thread with the knots and the ends all showing, so it really values the workmanship that's being done. And then between the layers, she cuts away the top layer to reveal from the design the layer of the second color underneath, so you get the double layer and the second color. It's quite her workmanship is exquisite. It's actually Natalie Channing is the founder and the creative director of Alabama Channing. She was on the cover of my first book, and she actually wrote the introduction and the foreword on this latest book, Refashioned. So I'm very grateful for her because her work is exquisite. Rachel Frieri, she's wonderful. Trained in fine arts. She was originally a fine artist and realized that she didn't want her work to only be admired in a somewhat rarefied gallery setting. She realized that she wanted her work to actually be lived in. So she sort of ended up in fashion design by default, creating for the body instead of for the wall. She's best known for a range of exquisitely designed pieces constructed from delicate powder pink and a deep matte black leather rosettes. They're juxtaposed in her designs with militaristic pouches, straps, dominatrix-like corsetry spines, and these incredibly delicate floral rosettes. Her designs simultaneously cover and reveal, all the while disguising their source material. This collection is infamous because of the source material. At once she sort of beguiles her audience with her sophisticated avant-garde sense of design and exquisite workmanship, and ended up horrifying and disgusting many people with her source material, which is cow nipples. The nature of a material, she showed this collection at London Fashion Week at Aesthetica, which is the eco-fashion trade show in London. And the materials that she used elicited a visceral response from her viewers, and there was a massive outpouring of press from her London Fashion Week presentation that was sweeping, judgmental, and absolutely brutal. Her work was branded as grotesque, sickening, and repulsive because of her material choice. The reality is, however, that cow nipples are a part of the leather skin that's normally discarded. Anyone who works in leather, when you buy a skin, the nipples are not on there. They've already been cut off and they've already been thrown away. So it is a byproduct, for the most part, from the meatpacking industry. And it's a part of the skin that is just systematically discarded as useless. It's never, nobody ever even sees it normally. So one of the main tenets of eco-fashion design is the minimizing of waste material and the revaluing of undervalued material. And honestly, I can't think of a better example than this. And you can see her work is quite exquisite. This is a close-up of one of the pieces. Each flower has 10 petals, and each from a different animal. Some designs have take as many as 3,000 cow nipples to produce. I know that sounds a little bit icky, but you really have to see these pieces. The dimension of the materials, we're talking about tiny offcuts from skins, require that each one of these flowers absolutely has to be handcrafted and handmade. So these are very labor-intensive designs. She plays, obviously, she's an intelligent designer. She plays with themes of disgust and attraction throughout all of her work. She challenges quite deliberately how we see materials, how we view them, how we react to them. So it's a very deliberate choice that she's taken this material that people have this immediate visceral reaction to and crafted these very beautiful, delicate flowers from them. So her work is highly visual, creative, and it's a cerebral investigation into beauty and response. With that type of controversial, intelligent mentality behind her designs, she appeals a lot to other artists, and a lot of her clients are celebrity actors and musicians. This is another designer who works with the same theme, Kerry Howley. She's another UK-based designer. And she focuses on our visceral connection to our culture and our world and our materials. She explores how some materials provoke conflicting emotions and responses, and she produces this exquisitely fine, filigreed collection of necklaces made from discarded human hair. So hair is a very unique place in Western culture. It evokes pride when it's clean, attached, healthy, and yet it triggers feelings of disgust and aversion when it's detached and plugging up a drain, for example. So she works with these very delicate and intricate patterns, and she seeks how to combine these two emotions into a pleasing whole. She carefully deconstructs the cultural codes of hair and pattern simultaneously, how we view it in our society, and juxtaposes these responses and quite intentionally within our designs. So the delicate, intricate adornment is part of that juxtaposition with the material choice, thereby exploring emotional conflict through her designs. She works with wallpaper patterns, are where the source of her designs come from. That's her inspirational base. And she constructed 5 necklaces for this particular collection, which took about 60 hours a piece to produce. She worked with mostly donated hair. And the process was to tangle and mat the hair when she received it to make it easier to work with. Obviously, working with something as fine and delicate as human hair it's not an easy material choice to work with. So she found various means to combat that. The work was directly pinned onto her design. She had to work directly onto her patterns. And she used the very fine teeth of a jeweler's saw blade to try and encourage the hair into particular directions. And then they're fastened with very tiny, tiny micro droplets of resin glue. And she couldn't touch any of these pieces with fingers because fingers were just really too big and clumsy to be able to work with this level of delicacy. Christine Meyer, Meyer Piece Collection. This is a Berlin-based designer who works mostly with discarded and second-hand domestic materials. Her materials range from table linen, mattress ticking, recycled denim jeans, Pakistan quilts, and military materials. So a very wide range of source materials. And she produces a really beautiful collection. She's one of my favorite designers and has been for some time. Often with a sort of Napoleonic militaristic type styling in her jackets, but layered with something very simple and almost sort of naive with milkmaid type layered skirts on the bottom. This particular piece is all domestic textiles from France. She's actually a master of revaluing materials with a history. She honors their past, their history, and the lives that those textiles have lived, marked by holes, stains, rips. That's part of the value that the textiles bring with them. She completely recontextualizes those damage. So instead they represent history, heritage, and tradition instead of stains, holes, and pulls. And they're marks of lives that the fabric has lived in their previous life. So she communicates an authenticity through her designs that's absolutely impossible to mimic with new materials. She's probably best known for her collection of jackets and coats that are made from antique Bavarian flour sacks from the mid-1850s, and this and the next slide are really great examples of that. And she sees her work much like an artist communicating between the material and the creator, similar to a sculptor in a way, who's releasing the meaning of the clothing. And it's her responsibility, she believes, to tell those stories and to extend the life of those materials. As with most designers, each piece is hand cut. It's draped directly on the mannequin. She chooses to work with the most decorative components of the textiles first and then fills in with the offcuts. No two pieces are exactly the same, although she does repeat styles. Everyone is inevitably different because the textiles are different every time. But I think this piece probably exemplifies the revaluing of wear and tear, probably better than most, because you can see the stain right in the center of the jacket, right up by the neckline. And there's patches and holes in her work, and it's part of the real value of what she produces. This is an Austrian company called KMA. Katha Hara is the designer behind it. And I think she's one of the best examples I know of the power that recycled materials carry with them. This is a line of jackets that are constructed from Austrian prison blankets. So in the Austrian prison system, inmates are required to weave their own blankets when they enter the system. And those blankets are used by the prisoners for the entirety of their incarceration. When the inmates release, the blankets are retired, and KMA construct men's and women's jackets and coats from them. And this is one of the examples. Again, everyone is different, but these are powerful materials. You know, when you're in a room with one of these jackets, they have a strong sense of history that's just embedded in the textile. I was lucky enough just to receive one from her last week, actually, so I'm dying for it to get colder so I can wear it. They work with a wide range of materials, really quite diverse. This particular jacket is made from recycled cotton jersey. So again, simple cotton t-shirt fabric. The t-shirts, much like the other designers that work with scraps, are sorted by color. They're shredded into tiny pieces, and they're layered on top, in this case, of a base fabric, and actually sandwiched between a layer of wool felt. And they're crazy patchwork stitched all over to keep all the tiny patches together in one place. And then they are pressed at a high temperature, and that pressing causes the fleece in the center to shrink and gives this terrific texture to the material. So there's all these ends hanging off as this crazy patchwork stitch, and then the shrunken fabric creates this fabulous texture that gives it a volume that you can see in the photo quite clearly here. This is actually exactly the same process, not with cotton jersey, but with offcuts of men's pinstripe suitings, but the same process, the wool in between, the shrinking and so on. And she literally uses the tiniest of offcuts and selvages that are traditionally considered completely worthless and useless. These are cutting room scraps that are just swept up and thrown away without any consideration of whether they would have value or they don't. And this is a designer that has found a way of constructing incredible pieces of art and workmanship from these materials. This is also KMA, and she produces a collection of jackets, coats and dresses from individually crafted, decommissioned Italian Air Force parachutes. So this is a dress made from Italian Air Force parachute. I don't know why, but for some reason the Italian military used to use cotton for their parachutes. I thought everyone in the world used silk before they changed to ripstop nylon, but it seems the Italian used very fine cotton. So these are actually constructed from beautiful, finely woven cotton parachutes. And she retains all of the individual detailing, seaming that make it authentic. So whether it's the ripcords you can see are actually here, the lace up on the back of the dress, in some cases the oversized packed hoods or the identifying numbers of the parachutes are all part and parcel of her design. Completely changing stylistically. Part of my intent here is to show that this isn't, one tier of distribution or one price point or one type of styling. There's an enormous range of designers here working at every level of the market creatively with wasted materials. This is from somewhere. They're actually a very well-renowned UK brand. The founder is Ursula de Castro, who's actually also the founder of Aesthetica, which is the London Fashion Week eco-fashion trade show, one of the most important eco-trade shows in the world. I'd say probably the most important eco-trade show in the world, and it's part and parcel of London Fashion Week. Her collections are generally made with luxury pre-consumer textile waste as opposed to post-consumer. So these are textiles that are wasted at source through production. And she works mostly with offcuts from Italian mills and factories. Despite being English, she's Italian, so her connections with Italian mills, that's where she works. So she works with unwanted swatches. Anyone in the industry would know strike-off, sample yardage, production ends, misprints, any number of wasted textiles at the beginning of the process. And what's lovely about her is she really has found a design solution to an environmental problem. And her pieces are unique and instantly recognizable. She has a very particular type of styling. She's also worked with a number of high street giants. So companies in the UK like Jigsaw and Topshop. You may not know Jigsaw, but I'm sure you know who Topshop is. These are high street chains with a lot of stores. And what she has done for them and continues to do for some of them is to take their end of season stock that's unsold and to redesign it, recut it, and then the companies reintroduce it back into the market and resell them with the new added value. So she's done that for a number of companies. As I said, the beauty of her pieces is this really poetic, contemporary design and this ethical solution to using post-consumer waste. This is waste that most people don't even see unless they're working in the industry. This is what she's really renowned for right now. One of the things Ursula's been struggling with is how do you take recycled design, which is intrinsically often about working with unique materials, how do you take that to scale? How do you make that commercial as opposed to just individual and one-off? So this was one of her first adventures into undertaking that process. And this is a unique collaboration she had with Speedo. I don't know how many of you remember the LZR racer suit. It won 90, I think, or maybe it was 80 world swimming records. It was worn by some of the most renowned competitive swimmers in the world. And then it was banned by the by the competitive swimming body because they decided that it was giving the swimmers an unfair advantage over swimmers that weren't wearing them. So Speedo was left with thousands of these suits. We're talking about swimsuits that have no really other use. Unless you're a competitive swimmer, there'd be no reason to have a swimsuit that went from your neck down to your ankle and with full-length sleeves. These weren't particularly attractive suits, but they were very functional. And they were left with thousands of meters of the fabric, as well as all of the materials and the ready-made swimsuits left over. So something that was really a rather unusual display for a global brand like Speedo, they decided that they were going to find an alternative means to incinerating the suits, which is the usual end for materials like this. That they would give them to a number of artists and designers and see what they came up with. And Ursula's now in the 4th season of a collaboration with Speedo. She launched this initially through Selfridges and also on Ukes online, and it's been extremely successful. And this is one of the pieces. You can see the logo up on the top right of the dress there, and also in various other places. They allowed her absolute carte blanche to cut the logos up, cut the fabric up any way she wanted and do what she wanted with them. And she ended up producing this really cutting-edge, cool collection of dresses from it. This is another piece from the same collection. So for the most part, it's a pretty edgy, conceptual collection, and it features a lot of frills and colour insertions, and as I said, it was sold initially through Selfridges, and it was launched during Climate Week. And then the e-commerce launch was actually done to coincide with International Earth Day. This is Christopher Rayburn. He's a really important UK designer. He won the London Fashion Week's New Generation Award for several years in a row, I think 3. He creates a men's and a women's wear collection from reappropriated military fabrics. So things like Swedish camouflage tank Tyvek and army snowsuits and Royal Air Force cotton flying suits. He also uses Virgin Atlantic Airway hot air balloons. He uses Eurostar uniforms. This is his source material. This particular dress here is actually from a parachute. So this is one of the more modern parachutes. This one is ripstop cotton. And Christopher's known for a very techie collection. He specializes really in garments that are functional, they're intelligent, they're meticulously crafted, as well as very proudly remade in England. That's part of his brand, that everything is remade in England. And he has an extreme attention to detail, which is very reminiscent in a way of the military overstocks that he actually uses as his base material. He is really iconically English in his demeanour and his sense of really good British design. And he represents really a very modern, youthful, urban eco-collection, which has a very utilitarian perspective. This is an Italian brand, Carmine Campus. They're a company that was started by Venturini Fendi, Ilaria Venturini Fendi, who's the youngest daughter of Anna Fendi, one of the 5 sisters that completely transformed the Fendi family business into what became an international brand. Venturini uses the family's brand approach to artisanal fashion, but using discarded and damaged materials and refashioning them into desirable objects that she makes precious through the workmanship and the craftsmanship that her family is known for. Her bags are made from the broadest range of materials that you can really, beyond imagination. Each one of them centers around a theme or a particular issue in many cases. So this is a range of bags that is made from shower curtains and leftover plastic bags. And the intention here was to draw attention to water issues, hence them being all waterproof. And in the case of the bags that are made out of rubbish bags, the intention was to highlight the garbage crisis, which in Italy was quite extreme. So she thinks way outside of the box in terms of repurposing materials, and I've got a slide coming up that will show that. She uses things like airplane seats, car seats, interior design swatch books. I'm talking about floor tiling and ceiling tiles, all kinds of things, volleyball nets, old belts, Venetian blinds, cleaning sponges. There's sort of nothing that she won't take on and find a creative solution to reusing. This one is one of those creative solutions. This is a selection of bags she did called the switch bags, because they're actually made from switches, light switches, samples, or old ones, unsold ones, damaged ones, and so on. So these are the electrical plug cover plates that she made a selection of bags out of the cover plates and the leather swatches and vintage scarves. And the handle is either a toilet chain, an old-fashioned toilet chain, or vintage belts, any number of different materials she uses. So really nothing is beyond her in terms of recontextualizing materials. She also works with African communities and collaborates with the International Trade Center, which is a joint United Nations World Trade Organization agency. And her bags, many of her bags, not all of them, some of them are produced in the slums of Nairobi. And they're sold in places like Dieci Corso Como, some of the most luxury stores around the world. And that's part of her intent, is to send the message that sustainable design can be luxury. This particular bag, if you can see, there's little names and numbers on the bottom of all of these squares. That's because they were color swatches for interior design. I can't remember if these were leather swatches or what they were, but so many of her pieces have the names and the number if you were going to be ordering that fabric commercially. So that's an example of her work. So what I hope to do really is to communicate with this presentation, and indeed the book, is to showcase what incredible beauty and design there is coming from a wide range of designers working with an even wider range of materials, to show that a range of talented designers are completely recontextualizing value and luxury through their skill. Whatever you thought of recycled or upcycled fashion, forget it. This is the new luxury. It values heritage, craft skills, design, and it's created through conscious material choices. The energy that these materials carry with them, in some cases, is absolutely palpable. The holes and the stains used on, for example, a flour sack from the turn of the century Germany, are part and parcel of the beauty of the materials and something that adds value and does not detract from the value. Fashion is the perfect vehicle to inspire change. It has the power to change how we do business, how we consume, and how we quantify value. All of my writing supports emerging designers and communicates the really worthwhile work that is being undertaken in conceptual, intelligent, cutting-edge design. To coordinate with the launch of this book, this is actually my last slide, I relaunched my website today as well, so it's been there for a long time, but we relaunched it to coincide with tonight. So I'm going to show you a quick sneak peek. It's actually live now, so kind of scary. So it's been up for 3 years, so we have 3 years of blog posts that were all transferred across on inspirational designers, resource listings, ethical designers' websites, all within eco-fashion. And let me see if I can get that for you. It should be right down here. Where are you? Here we go. And this should be live. So this is the new site, so it's up, and you can see it goes on forever. You can load and load and load. These are all various posts, press, all sorts of a number of different things from the past 3 years, and so now I'll be starting again to upload. The link here isn't going quite as fast as I would like, but there you go. That's a local designer, Feral Child, that I featured on the website just before we started transferring. So you can see all the websites here. Everybody has, every post has the designer's direct link at the bottom. So if you're interested in more information, you can go back. There's a resource listing with literally thousands of designers on here, and it's all searchable. You can go by any number of different criteria. You can see here is the keywords, or you can type in anything you want. You can put New York and see who comes up as a New York designer, or you can choose women's wear, accessories, whatever. So lots and lots of info here. Let me just take that back to the last slide. There we go. So I'm also, as part of the launch of this book, I'm in the process of trying to organize pop-up shop within a shop. So featuring the work of the designers that are in the book, as well as a range of other local designers at various luxury department stores around the world. So keep your fingers crossed that that happens. The intent is to expose the designers' work to a global audience, as well as support them through the commercial sale of their work, so they will get a new audience, and the audience will see designs that otherwise they wouldn't. The book covers designers from absolutely around the world, from Hong Kong, from Chile, from London, to any number of places, Sri Lanka, etc. So to be able to collect them all together and recontextualize them in a luxury designer setting is really the intention. So so far I'm talking with department stores in New York, Paris and Italy, in Milan. So keep your fingers crossed and stay tuned. Thank you.
So if you would like to ask any questions, this is the time to do so.
And I think after this, we're going to have a book signing at the top, so anyone that's bought a book, I'd be happy to sign it, or if you want to buy a book, the bookstore is up there, and I'll be signing then. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
My question for you has to do with this term sustainability, which very much is a buzzword these days. And so I'm wondering how you understand sustainability, both in the context of eco-fashion and then in the greater fashion industry as well.
Well, sustainability is one of those words that actually does have a dictionary definition. There are a lot of words that are thrown around: green fashion, eco-fashion. Lots of people have the ones they like, the ones they don't like, and because when a word gets reused, misused, etc., people tend to go off it a lot. But sustainability is a word that does have a proper definition. And it really means not to, it's a product or a process that doesn't deplete, whether that's planetary, human, ecologically, through the process of its production. And it does not pollute at the end of its life, so go into landfill or whatever. So that's the definition of sustainability. Now, is there such a thing as a truly sustainable garment at this stage? No, not really. The closest anyone's got really is Patagonia and their recycled base layers, which is PET fiber, monofiber, which can be melted down. So that's about as close as we've got. But it's a process. So, but as I said, a lot of people have gone off words like, not so much sustainability, but green or eco, because they've been so grossly misused. So a lot of people are choosing conscious design or ethical design, but it's a matter of choice, and really a lot of this is about transparency. It's about, we all have access to the internet. We can all do our due diligence and find out who's really doing the right thing. So.
Hi, I'm in the front. Thank you very much for being here. I think you gave a lot of really great...
Oh, hello.
Hi. I think you gave a lot of really great examples of design successes, but as a small business owner of a eco-fashion label, I'm really interested in the business successes, and you started to get at that with from somewhere I know, where Sola has done a great job, and Patagonia, but who are some other business successes if you look at from a business model, production, sales, marketing standpoint?
Well, inevitably a lot of the designers working with recycled materials are emerging. And you also have to define what success means to you. A lot of people are in the process of redefining what that means. Triple bottom line: people, planet, not just profit. So in many cases, designers choose not to become global brands, or choose not to become to sell out through the commercialization of their products. And that's the case with some of these brands. They're quite happy doing what they're doing. That doesn't mean everybody is. Certainly designers like Ursula de Castro, you mentioned From Somewhere, have been looking for a long time to how do you take this to scale. And in fact, her motivation really isn't profit. Her motivation is how do I make a greater impact on taking waste from the supply, from the chain, going straight to landfill. So how do you define success? Many of these designers are quite successful in their own right. Some of them are big brands. Many of them are emerging. Inevitably in design and in cutting-edge design, a lot of it is emerging designers and not the bigger brands, because there's a certain amount of balance of commerciality and mass market, which isn't interested in high-price, cutting-edge work. So I choose to write about those that are making conscious choices through cutting-edge design, but it doesn't mean there aren't a bunch of other companies out there that are doing really, really well, because there are.
Thank you for your talk tonight.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the fact that you've been highlighting these emerging designers and the work that they've been doing. Could you speak for a moment about our need not just to recontextualize materials and to look at new processes, but the challenge that we have for redefining aesthetics and what's pleasing to the eye in the context of mass fashion and fast fashion?
Oh, yikes, there's so much to address there. I mean, everything from, the use of, in the idealization of size zero bodies in the mass market, of, using 14-year-old models as an ideal. Many of these designers, there was one I toyed with putting in here tonight, choose to work with alternative models, for example, whether it's different ethnicities, different body types, any number of different things, to talk about how they're recontextualizing not just their material use, but trying to recontextualize the industry and challenge a lot of the things that are really standardized. Many of the designers work with challenging the system of fashion. So whether it's, the expected 4 seasons a year, the sample range, the trade show, the agent, all of those things that are an expectation in our industry, most of them are challenging that, whether they're selling through e-commerce, whether they're doing art installations or exhibits or selling direct to consumers. So there are so many ways that designers are trying to challenge the system in this sphere. One of the big challenges that I have with recycled materials is taking it to scale. But I also think it's one of the biggest opportunities. And I am just waiting, and I've written about this a few times now, for someone like H&M or a major high-end retailer, not high-end, sorry, mass market, high street retailer, who works with designer collaboration, such as H&M. Why not challenge, instead of, whoever, a Louis Vuitton to do a capsule collection, why not challenge them to use their waste and do a capsule collection? Why not? I mean, I think that could be something that's as high profile. They could use just as an important name and promote it, and at the same time make a massive difference. These companies produce incredible amounts of waste, so they have the opportunity to take that amount of waste and scale it into production recycling, and that's really what needs to happen. And so I've written about it a few times. I'm waiting for one of them to take up the challenge, but I'm hoping it will happen.
Hi, I'm up here.
Hello.
Hi, I really enjoyed your talk. It was very fun. I did have a question. Some of the questions were about success or translation for the mass market, and I'm curious, you mentioned a few of the designers have training that came about through design or fashion or schooling. Like many of the students are professors here, and I'm just curious, what about those of us who learned it from our aunties or picked it up like me, because I like vintage clothes and I just couldn't bear to buy anything because of the conditions of its manufacturing. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the training of the folks that you mentioned here, but also the other sort of ideas that are infusing the movement.
Sure, the designers in this area have come from so many different backgrounds. Yes, some have come as trained fashion designers, some have come from other trained fields such as fine artists or sculptors. I've written about a number of designers who have a background in fine art and sculpture in particular, who've then translated that spatial knowledge and that design knowledge into designing clothing or accessories, or jewelry even. But there are also, as part of the whole maker movement, I mean, the US in particular has been going through a massive maker revolution, that whole DIY. I mean, many of these designers, Alabama Channing, Natalie, whose work I I featured. She does, as well as selling her exquisite pieces directly online, she sells a DIY kit. You can buy the fabric and sew it yourself, you know, or you can go to one of her workshops and learn her techniques with her. So there are many, many designers in the field that have come from that maker revolution, who've really taught themselves, they've learnt the skills, they couldn't find what they wanted in the marketplace. They really didn't want to work for the commercial field and be dependent upon selling out their creativity to a commercial brand. So there are a lot of designers that have come from that untrained, or have just come back and taken classes, you know, taken individual whatever type of learning, whether online classes, whatever. I mean, we have, for example, here at FIT, we have the Sustainability Certificate. It's not a full-time program, but it's something that you can come back and you can take a class of. So, and there are many of those options around, so that allow you to learn certain basic skills or hone the skills that you've already learned into another level. So, yeah, lots of people come that route too.
Right over here. Hi.
Hi.
So thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
One of the questions I had was, what are some of the price points for some of these designs? And the other question is, how are designers dealing with the challenge of, you know, creating a consistent image every year? Because they are dealing with whatever's out there in terms of, you know, recycled.
Sorry, how are they dealing with what each year?
How are they dealing with every year making sure that they are creating a consistent brand and consistent image?
Well, most of them have a very defined aesthetic. It's their materials that change, and many of them are quite focused in their materials. Paulina Pliska works with knits and shears. I mean, there's always knit and shear waste out there. Certainly designers like Maya, who use Bavarian flour sacks from the 1850s, there's a finite resource of those and it's running out and she can't continue using them. But I mean, creativity and invention is part of what gives them their strength. Their aesthetic and their DNA stays constant. The materials may change, but their aesthetic doesn't. You had another question in there, didn't you? Price point. Varies quite a lot. As I said, I tend to talk a lot about really the high-end designers and the cutting-edge work. So, for example, an Alabama Channing coat can run you anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000. The prison jacket that I showed from KMA is about €360. I happen to know that one off the top of my head. But then you've got, you know, local designers who are doing things on an entirely different scale. So no, they're not high street prices, but yes, you can pick something up that's for much less than that, you know, 150, whatever, depending upon what we're talking about. So the price range is quite broad, but it tends to, because they're individually crafted, to be at the higher end.
I have a question. You mentioned in the beginning that many designers are stitching the cloth to the model, right? So how do they do, if they do, a kind of rolling out to larger scale, and would they also stitch on a body which is not maybe so ideal?
Absolutely. Many of these designers work directly with clients, so they do custom work. Some designers absolutely do drape directly on the models, so they'll repeat the style, but the materials constantly change, and maybe the fit changes, the sizing changes, and so on, but they do repeat styles. And there are designers that do take it to scale. I didn't show Milch, for example. They're an Austrian brand that only work with recycled men's suiting, so they've got a system, because they're working with very standardized materials. Men's pants and jackets don't really vary that much. The material, the color changes, the sizing changes, but the styling doesn't vary massively in a men's suit pant. So when you're narrowing your material choices, you can then expand the number of pieces that you continuously cut. Junkie Styling do the same in the UK, again narrowing their material source so they can cut multiples and quite good numbers of it. So there are designers that do that, for sure. Actually, From Somewhere, that's another one, because she works with headers, so we're talking about standardized squares of material, and there's others like Reethouse and so on who cut or locally, piece by piece, who cut the materials down to a standard size, and then they do a patchwork out of those pieces and cut multiples. So there are ways of doing it for sure.
Hi. My question is more about sustainability in terms of artisanal crafts. Do you think that that is just as important as sustainability in terms of upcycling materials?
It's actually the next book. I'm actually just started researching a while ago on artisanship. My background's working with women's cooperatives, mostly in developing countries, so it's a passion of mine, recontextualizing craft and artisanship. So yes, that will be book 3.
Hi. I'm wondering how that Giorgio Armani gown came about. Was that something from the Armani people?
No, actually, Livia Firth has been knocking away at this for quite a while. She's Colin Firth's husband, who won the Golden Globe, the Emmy, whatever it was, for the King's Speech. And so she had been wearing on the red carpet on the arm of Colin for a number of years local London eco-designers. So she's always had this thing called the Green Carpet Challenge, where she challenged herself. In fact, it was Lucy Siegel, who's the sustainability writer for The Guardian newspaper in the UK. She had challenged Lucy to do it. So, or rather, Lucy had challenged Livia to do it. And so for a number of years she'd been doing this, and with a little bit of coverage, but not a ton. Then Colin won the Oscar, I think it was, and of course all of a sudden she, being on his arm, was being asked what she was wearing an awful lot more than she had previously. So directly after that, a good friend of hers is Guisi Petoni, who's the owner of Class in Italy, which is an agency for, amongst other things, eco-textiles. So she partnered with Guisi to have companies like Armani, Valentino, Paul Smith, Stella McCartney, a whole range of really high-profile designers make a different red carpet gown for her. I think the red carpet season is 10 or 12 events that happen in the season, and so because of Colin's now high profile, she managed to challenge each of those major designers to work with Guisi's textiles, so much of which was recycled polyester, PET. So that's how that came about.
My question is, how many of the designers are using materials from other manufacturers as opposed to pre-worn items? And also, if it's pre-worn, is there some special cleaning process they need to use?
Sure. The book's actually divided by pre- and post-consumer waste, so designers that are working with waste that's from source, whether it's metals or materials, textiles, whatever it is. So I think I showed Carmina Campos there, so she was using swatches. They'd never really been used. They were just sample swatches from somewhere specialized with offcuts from the factory floor. So many of those designers do work with pre-consumer waste. For those that are working with post-consumer waste, but yeah, they all have their own cleaning processes, obviously, to make the materials clean before they use them. Some have their own very specialist cleaning processes, working with orange peels and organic materials that help clean the fabrications before they work with them, but they're all cleaned, and most of them are relatively conscious about how they clean those textiles before they use them. I don't think they'd want to be draping with the used socks anyway before before washing them. Yeah. It is. It's something that they all it's very carefully part of their process. How do they collect the materials is one of the challenges. Then how do they clean them and then utilize them? So it's very much a part of what they go through. So yes, they all have their own defined methods.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you talk a little bit more about collection methods of the post-consumer or even the pre-consumer textiles?
Sure, I'll give you a couple of examples. From Somewhere, for example, which was featured, she worked directly with factories. When she first started, she'd be begging them for scraps, and now it's become much easier because factories also want to do the right thing and be seen to do the right thing and use their waste and donate it to designers in many cases. So a lot of designers get donations direct from the factories. In Ursula's case, they put aside the scraps of the types of materials she knows they like. They just go straight into a bag. They sit there until she picks them up. In cases of post-consumer, that's a lot more difficult. Steinweider, for example, who used the socks, they started with pre-consumer waste. In fact, they are located next to a sock factory, so that's how all this came about. They used to get all the damaged socks from the sock factory, but then they couldn't get enough to keep up production, so they started using post-consumer. I don't know what their collection, how they collect their socks as it happens, but there are companies that I do know, such as Trade Remade in the UK, which is a charity shop, so they get it direct from charity donations. They Schmidt Takahashi, which is a Berlin-based designer. They work with some really great materials, and they're all donated through textile donation boxes. They have their own that they operate right across Berlin. And many designers work directly with recycling centers. So they will be able, when they sort through the clothes that are donated to the recycling centers, certain types of materials we put aside for them already, and they work directly with them. So there's a number of different ways of sourcing. Welcome.
So please join me in thanking Sass for tonight. And we'll proceed to the book signing section of the evening. So it's going to take place upstairs by the check-in table.